wealth, fame, ego, expression, or sometimes just big proportion. We all draw for different reasons, but despite our different styles and goals, I believe that every artist will eventually run into... I'm Cora. I'm by no means a professional, I'm just a fellow learning artist. So what is character design even about? It's just pretty looking characters, right? And I see them all the time, so how hard can it really be? Firstly, what exactly is the purpose of a character design? A character design is about visual communication. We can tell so much about a character with no use of words and within mere milliseconds. There's a rule in writing called show, don't tell. And that applies as well to character design. If your design can tell everything about your character with no words, then it's a good design. Okay, that's not entirely true. A character's design is likely the first impression we get of a character. Are they friendly or hostile? Are they grumpy or maybe energetic? Their culture, occupation, or financial situation? I know we shouldn't judge people by their appearance, but we are really judgmental. If there's something I want you to keep in mind, character design can be quite subjective, just like any other form of art. So you can definitely disagree with some of the things I say here. You've likely heard some say that good character designs makes your character memorable, which I would only say is half true. Some people remember characters just because they're pretty or sexy, even if they wouldn't be considered good character design. And then there's Concord, and yes, while some character designs might be super unique, that doesn't mean that they're automatically good. There's a difference between visually pleasing designs and good character design. What most character designers would consider a good design is a design that tells about your character. So yes, while a character can look dazzling, if it doesn't tell us who they are at all, in the traditional sense, this would be considered a bad character design. That said, of course there are good character designs that are also very aesthetically pleasing. But I've got a few questions regarding character designs. For my first question, how much do you even need to tell? Let's say you write a story about a murder mystery. All the other characters looks completely innocent, except for this one dude called Scammy San Diego. And then oh no, turns out Scammy San Diego was the murderer all along. Also, when I see some artists who critique characters, what's their profession? What's their job? Do we always have to show their occupation? Oh, look at me, I'm the subway guy. Okay, I guess it depends on how much you intend to show. Good design might not need to tell you everything. For my second question, character design subversion. Imagine a terrifying character, but they're secretly a sweetheart. You know, like Gab Moe. Sure, the audience can read that this character is sweet, and the side characters within the story, they are also afraid of their appearance. Is that a good or bad character design then? There's a lot of questions regarding character design. I mean, it kinda is its own thing. I'll try to not only give tips for making a good character design in terms of narrative, but I will also try and give tips for making aesthetically pleasing designs, since I know a portion of you likely just want to make cool looking OCs. First thing I want to talk about is kinda obvious, but a lot of people don't do it. If your idea of a character is barely planned out, it can lead to a really messy process, and you might not end up with a design that you try to aim for. So I highly recommend you to plan and flesh out your idea before designing. Of course, you don't need a full character description and info card at the start. Some designers even like to draw random thumbnails for a character, and then they select and turn a thumbnail into a full design. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's multiple ways of making characters. In my opinion, if you're designing a character important to a story, say a main character, a villain, or an important side character, I would personally suggest planning ahead instead of just randomly thumbnailing. And later I'll also show you my own process of making a character. Sometimes I see characters with way too many ideas going in all sorts of directions. This can lead to your design becoming too hard to read. However, having a bunch of themes isn't always an issue. Sometimes it's just the organization of them. Let's take a look at Saval from HSR. She's a rock star and a scientist, but there's a certain hierarchy in her design. The rock star aspect is a lot more emphasized than scientist. I know Saval here isn't really the best example. A lot of you probably wouldn't have guessed scientist. You get my point though. Try and think, what is the main theme that you want to show? Have a clear direction for your concept. So how do we get a clear direction for a character? Here are some methods that I would recommend. A method I like to use for coming up with concepts is just a bit of brainstorming, with the key concept being in the middle, let's say a pirate. First you write down some supporting themes or words, usually associated with the word pirate. Then we can expand further, writing words we associate with the supporting words. We can then start combining these words. An evil monstrous squid pirate, Davy Jones. A gay, charismatic, dramatic and rebellious pirate, Brand from Wuthering Waves. That's another thing I want to add on. Coherent concepts. For Davy Jones, squids and pirates are bound together by the sea theme. Or even Saval, how rock stars, electric guitars and science is bound together with her lightning themes. If your ideas and themes doesn't feel connected, it can lead to a really confusing design. For example, Queen Bee from Hazbin Hotel. A design that many aren't really a fan of. Let's do a quick analysis of her themes. We're about to explore a very subjective design. I'm someone who hasn't watched the show, so this is purely from a visual design perspective. Queen Bee has a lot of themes. Some I'm not even sure how they tie together. I can appreciate designs that subvert expectations. The endless lava stomach being a metaphor for gluttony. Gluttony can also mean self-destruction, which I believe is reflected through alcoholism. And I'll be honest, I think it's a nice idea. However, the themes are still all over the place. I can barely read its Beelzebub, sin of gluttony, unless someone explains it to me. But in my opinion, it turns into a tell don't show design, and I'm not really a fan of that approach. If you ask me to guess which one of these is Beelzebub, I would never have guessed a wolf. But then we also have to ask, what was the intentions behind the design? If the Beelzebub theme is supposed to be subtle, I can respect that. I haven't watched the show, so I can't tell how central Beelzebub, the sin of gluttony, is to her design. Also, I know I said earlier that your themes should feel connected, but of course you can have contradicting themes. The problem is when there's just way too many, or if your themes aren't balanced well. Contradicting themes can create depth, but if handled poorly, it can create chaos and confusion. The second method for clearer direction is mood. Some designers like to think of a mood first that they try and visualize via a concept and design. Having a mood in mind is a great way to already spark a bit of inspiration, and it's a nice way to keep your design in a certain direction. So how do you come up with a mood? Maybe just ask yourself, what mood do you want to portray to the viewers when they see your characters? Is it a dark and gritty mood like Davy Jones? Or maybe a fun and playful mood like Brand? You could also use music. Music is a really great way to portray a character. For example, the music you hear in gacha game trailers when they release a new character. They often have music that is tailor-made for the character. Maybe next time you listen to some music, you could use it as inspiration for the mood of a character. It doesn't even have to be music, it could also be movies, games, or other kinds of media. A third method is a character description. A lot of artists makes a list of traits about the character. Favorite food, hobby, favorite flavor of ice cream. You don't really need to go this far, but the more you know about your character, the easier it is to answer questions like, what style of clothing would they be wearing? Fashion is a great way to tell about your character. Maybe they are noble and dress up very elegantly. Or maybe fashion doesn't bother them at all and you give them some casual clothing. Clothing can also reflect the environment. Maybe characters wear similar clothing if they're connected. You could also do outfit changes to tell a story. It could be subtle, like in Breaking Bad, how their outfit changes over time. Or maybe more direct visual storytelling, like the dark suit trope. You can even tell about their backstory. Scars, prosthetics, worn-down clothing, or an old prop. These can tell something about the character without the use of words. And that's visual storytelling. I've gathered what I think is about 7 to 8 hours worth of videos on YouTube. I'm probably never gonna make another character design video ever again after this. To quickly summarize, plan out your design and have a clear direction with the themes. But before all of this, the audience will notice something else first. You've probably heard of the term shape language or shape design before. Is shape language complicated? Well, yeah, but also not really. Here's a fun fact about the human brain. Our brain tries to compare what we see with something that we've already experienced in order to understand it. And that's really all shape language is about, just some basic psychology. Here's the 3 most basic shapes. Curved or round circular shapes. They're round, like balls or balloons. There's no sharp angles or corners. It feels smooth. This makes circles feel soft, safe, or even approachable and inviting. This is why a lot of furniture is curved to promote a feeling of comfort. why cartoony styles are often circular for a friendly and approachable style, or even some brands. Circles are often used for characters like Totoro, Kirby, or Baymax for that friendly feeling. Square-like shapes, solid and takes a lot of space, maybe like bricks or walls. It feels sturdy, heavy, and grounded, often appearing in architecture, usually for the sense of stability. We usually assume square-like characters are stubborn and heavy. Triangular shapes are very versatile. Triangles can be pointy, like spikes and knives, giving a sense of danger. Ever wondered why the danger signs are often triangular? This is also the reason why that bad guys usually have sharp shape language. But lines that converge are directional, which is why triangles can also feel dynamic, giving a sense of movement. Depending on the direction, triangles could be stable and strong, or unstable and threatening, looking like it's about to tip over. We often see this in composition as well. These are often the three most discussed shapes, since anything really can be simplified into these shapes. And of course there are more uncommon shapes like this certain pillar shape, regal, royal, but also a bit sharp and threatening, twig-like shapes, thin, unstable, looks fragile and easy to break, half circles, friendly and circular, but also directional and dynamic, star or cross shapes. They could be demanding attention saying, look at me, because they converge into a point, or they could be threatening and say, stay away, danger. And I could go on. At the end of the day, it's really just a bit of psychology. We see a plus sign in games, it's healthy. We see curvy rocks, we get turned on. Does your character need to look like a triangle to show they're evil? No, of course not. The shape language can also be more subtle, like the shape of their hair. Could be soft and round or sharp and aggressive, or even sharp and dynamic since shapes has multiple meanings. It could also be their facial features. Of course, there are limitations depending on your style. Styles that are more abstract usually has a bit more freedom when it comes to shape design, while styles closer to realism usually needs a bit more creativity. It could be accessories or the body shape. Humans have a variety of bodies. I mean, sure, you could make a guy dress up like a tortilla chip. It might look goofy, but artistic freedom, I guess. Does your character design only need to stick to one shape? Not necessarily. You can combine shapes in order to create more complex characters. The Iron Giant, for example, has a threatening and wide triangular body, but circular friendly eyes. Jessica Rabbit, a femme fatale. Her body is curvy and alluring, but has sharp features. From Mario, a square-like heavy and solid figure with threatening spikes. But be careful when combining multiple shapes. If not organized well, it'll become way too complex and unreadable to the audience. If you want to have more complex shape language, I would suggest to have a hierarchy of shapes, with the most important ones being the most dominant. Let's talk about silhouettes for a second. Silhouettes is the first impression we get for the shape of a character. It highly affects how we perceive them. For example, a square-like character, maybe they're large and threatening, or small and compact. Even the way they pose can affect the silhouette and tell us more about the character. Unique and clear silhouette can heavily contribute to a more recognizable character. For example, when they do Who's That Pokemon? If you've seen this Pokemon before, you'll likely be able to tell which one it is due to its unique silhouette. A good character design is one which can be identified by its silhouette alone. You've likely heard this phrase before, which I would say is only half true. If you want to make a large cast of recognizable characters, a strong silhouette makes each character distinct. So yes, it is a good thing, but I wouldn't really say it's hard to make a recognizable silhouette. If an image is already ingrained into your brain, you'll likely recognize the image anyways, even if it's not a good character design. It might just be a memorable image because you're familiar with it. What I would say makes a silhouette readable is the use of positive and negative space in order to highlight certain shapes. And what I think makes a good silhouette is a silhouette which can be recognized from multiple angles and poses, and stands out from existing silhouettes within a cast. How important are silhouettes really? Take Bleach captains for example. Fans can easily recognize all of the Gotei 13 captains, despite all of them practically wearing the same thing. Is it harder to recognize all of them if they're all reduced to silhouettes? Yeah, probably, but tell me, how many shows has scenes where you can only see the silhouette? If you can mention 5 or even 50 shows, cool, but it's like 50 out of a million. Another question I have, does it only have to be recognizable within its own franchise, or outside of it like social media? Take a look at Thor from Reverse 1999. It's a shard of glass, sure, it's definitely recognizable within its own sphere, but anywhere else? How would you know it's even a character? Anyways, I guess to summarize, psychology. What do you want to evoke in your audience? Clear shape hierarchy, clear silhouettes. I would highly suggest learning color theory. I've seen some artists plop some random colors onto characters, praying it looks good enough. But colors play a huge part in how I perceive anything in general. In my opinion, colors play about as much importance as shapes. Since this is a video about character designing, I will only cover what is in my opinion the most important in terms of character design. So no, I won't go too in-depth for color theory. Just like how your brain relates shapes with things we've seen before, it absolutely does the same with colors. Maybe you've heard of color psychology or symbolism, which is used quite often in designs. Different colors have different symbolism and effects, and can lead to different moods and emotions. Sometimes the meaning of colors might cross each other. Color symbolism can also vary from culture to culture. Red in the West usually means danger, but in China, red is usually a symbolism for luck and fortune. So there's no way I'm going to be able to list all the different meanings. You're on your own, buddy. So how do we pick a color? Before picking a color, let's understand colors first. Colors can be broken down to 3 properties: hue, saturation, and value, and each of these can affect how you perceive something. Firstly, hues. The many different colors we see on the color wheel. The color wheels can be split into 2 sides, warm colors and cold colors. It's kinda debated where the split is, but the one I personally agree with the most is this one, red being the warmest, blue being the coldest, then green and purple being neutral, or magenta. Take note of magenta. Magenta is not on the visible spectrum of light. It's basically some sort of illusion. I won't really go into detail. Just note that some color wheels don't include magenta. Saturation, depending on how much, can either make your designs feel alive and dynamic, or static and cold. And I'm not saying that static is necessarily a bad thing. Look at these characters, the same hue, but different emotion due to the difference in the saturation. Keep in mind, some colors are more prominent and louder than others, despite both being at their highest level of saturation. Values, the things that make your colors look bright or dark. Colors can affect the heaviness we perceive. Brighter colors can bring an uplifting, innocent, hopeful, or open feeling. Darker colors can feel tense, mysterious, heavy, and so on. Values are a nice way to check if your colors are distinct. If the values of your character's features feels distinct, then it's easier to read their design. This is why you might see some artists work in grayscale. These are the 3 properties of a color. By changing these properties, we can get different types of colors. There's a chart I like showcasing how colors feel, made by the IRI Design Institute. They also made one for color palettes. Speaking of color palettes, I'm not gonna list all types, but here's what you need to know. There's colors that harmonize and colors that contrast. Colors close to each other on the color wheel harmonize. As the distance between the colors increases, the more they contrast. Contrasting colors can be used to create attention, or separate different parts from each other, or maybe just to spice up the color palette a bit. Palettes are just a combination of colors. Could be contrasting, harmonizing. By the way, if there's a design trope I like, it's really nice to see designs like Kazuha from Genshin or Carlotta from Wuthering Waves. They use colors that contrast and complement their element.
Oh, but if you look at them without their background, what are they then? Fire?
Shut up, it looks cool. Just because I'm Asian, that doesn't mean I wear a straw hat 24/7. There's this website by Adobe you can use if you want some help with palettes. You can be creative with your color palettes, but just like shapes, I suggest to have a balance or hierarchy. Having a bad balance of colors could lead to a boring or even unpleasant color palette. A common balance is the infamous 60-30-10 split. You can make colors that you don't think would work well still look decent if you just balance it well enough. Great, now that you know a bit about color theory, what can we do with this knowledge? Color is a great way to tell about your character. You could do a soft pastel color palette for a softer character, or saturated warm colors, showing how feisty and energetic they are. Your characters could also be lacking colors to present a cold personality. If you're working with a large varied cast of characters, by using colors, it can lead to each character being easier to recognize, or even connect characters if they are part of the same group. Colors can also be a tool for storytelling, like Megamind or Breaking Bad. The color progression is a reflection of the characters. Color is everywhere, so go study some color theory. We're about to enter a very subjective area again. Imagine a regular street, where everyone wears pretty casual clothing. And then this girl shows up in a wedding dress bunny suit with giant mechanical arms. Pretty obvious advice. But make your designs believable, or else it might break immersion. Unless, of course, you are trying to make something goofy and unbelievable. Please note, believable does not mean realistic. Ask yourself, is it believable within your character's environment? Maybe it's common within their culture to wear wedding dress bunny suits. Let's take a look at a design, which many felt like was disconnected from its own environment. This is Mawika from Genshin Impact. Mawika is from a nation called Netherlands. Netherlands borrows elements from several indigenous cultures. Genshin is a fantasy world, and they tried subverting players' expectations by using modern elements, which led to mixed reviews. There's ancient lost technology and magic in Genshin, and this blacksmith made her bike. Okay, that makes sense, we've seen technology before. But how come only Mawika has a modern looking motorcycle? Oh, some characters can jump between worlds, and Netherlands is a closed-off nation. Okay, sure, but why did the blacksmith make a bike if there's no roads? It's a symbolism of moving forward. Fine, you gave an explanation for her design to even make sense. But if you need this many layers to explain a singular design, in my opinion, this turns into a tell, don't show design. Technology has always been present in some parts of Genshin. However, it often had some sort of fantasy aesthetic. For a lot of players, these modern elements didn't feel established enough in previous updates. Why are these guys fighting wars with just spears and bows, when the nation next door has a giant flying gun? Even the Bunny Girl Society, just by looking at the crowd of bunny girls, we can tell it's normal within their culture without multiple layers of explanation. Let your design be a reflection of its world and environment. Of course, designs that don't fit the environment can work, as long as your world and story supports it. Like the many movies we have about aliens invading Earth. Obviously they don't fit the environment, and that's what makes them alien. What matters if they're supposed to feel alien on purpose? We've talked about whether a design makes sense within their own environment. But what about the medium? Each medium usually has different priorities. Live action movies usually tend for a more believable and realistic design. Look at the Robert Pattinson Batman versus the comic book Batman. We usually see Batman with a yellow utility belt, but this version has a black utility belt in order to make the costume a bit more practical in the dark. We also have to look at the tone. Obviously, the designs in the Gintama live action movie are a lot more goofy than John Wick. Two worlds could be fantasy, but have completely different tones, like Bloodborne or Breath of the Wild. In animation, character designs are usually a bit more simplified in order to animate it easier. You could also make it complex, but it would probably be a nightmare to animate. Camera angles can also be important. In MOBAs, you'll have to take into account that you'll likely see them from above, which can highly affect shapes and silhouettes. Characters in a game with a full 360 camera usually have details on all sides, even the back. VTuber designs usually favors the area near the face a lot, since it's mostly where the camera is. Some VTubers favor less practicality and purpose, and more just visual appeal, even if some details don't even make sense at all, like wings on the head. A part of media that highly favors visual appeal is gacha games. I love gacha, I love gambling, all hail Global Pass. Many gacha game characters usually follow the same principles. They try and gather a lot of attention for sales, either with vibrant colors, high detail, or just sexy looking characters, which is why gacha game characters often feel over-designed, which works, cause I play them. Sure, some of these designs might not be good in a traditional sense, but they're pretty to look at. Oh, they should do this for their character designs. It would have been so much better with less detail. I am such a good designer, they should hire me. Yeah, no, sorry to break it to your body. An average person's mind probably goes, more details equals higher quality. They're trying to please wallets over here, not Twitter artists. Hey, listen, I'm just saying, 100,000 of you critiqued and boycotted the game because of the Netline characters, and the game still made millions of dollars. In general, 3D models in games has higher detail, because, well, it's all in a 3D model now. There's no need to redraw it all frame by frame. To summarize, everything you add to your characters matters, so ask yourself, does your character fit the environment, without needing 5 layers of lore to explain why? We've discussed a bit about details, let's finally have a look at how to add details. We discussed earlier that every element you add to a design holds a purpose. Is it practical? Does it tell a story? Does it tell us about the character, like their personality, or maybe their culture or world? There's the infamous rule of cool, which is basically just the artist adding things because they think it's cool. But I've always wondered, what's the line between purpose and rule of cool? I personally see it as a scale. Each design element has different levels of purpose. On one side, we got pure purpose. This is where we get practical designs, not designed for the sake of fashion, but just pure practicality and storytelling. On the other end, some might find these full-purpose designs boring. That's where we have designs made with the intent to look cool, with no real purpose. Think of old DeviantArt OC designs. Somewhere in the middle is where we get characters like Jotaro, Furina, Silverwolf. These are kinda debated. They all have little features, which many might see as rule of cool driven, while a lot of people also argue that they're purposeful, even if they're not practical. Jotaro's chain, bold colors, and fashion inspired by old Japanese delinquents, they all signify and present his rebellious nature. Furina's fashion, in my opinion, perfectly encapsulates the environment and culture of Fontaine. Each little detail on her design carrying some form of symbolism or cultural meaning. The middle is what I like to call purposeful coolness, and I like these designs. I personally find them fun. 2D animators probably don't, but I'm not an animator. Let's be honest here, a lot of us love eye candy and details. If there's too little detail, designs might become uninteresting and plain. But it's really easy to get lost in details. You want to add as much as possible, make them unique. Psst, you see those details over there? I don't want to hear about I spent 5 days adding detail. Let's say all the details you added all served an important purpose. Even so, 1. Since our brain can read simple shapes faster, having too much detail will usually make your designs harder to read. Number 2. Having too much detail can clutter your design. Some might find it too noisy or distracting, which was often a common critique of the Michael Bay Transformers. Number 3. By adding too many elements that all equally serves an important purpose, it actually lowers the importance of the elements. If everyone is special, then no one is. So how much detail can you add? You can definitely add a lot of detail. Just remember to add areas where your eyes can rest, which is why some gacha game characters actually somehow works. There's resting areas. Maybe these designs aren't for everyone, but they still appeal to a lot of people. This is why many love the Bumblebee movie designs. The Transformers have highly detailed areas, like the Bayverse designs. It's like looking at the complex interior of a car, except that compared to the Bayverse, they're a bit more chunky, which allows for easier eye rest. Some designs become so cluttered that areas which would normally be a highly detailed area can actually turn into an area of rest. You can see artists like Mika Picasso use high detail and noise to make the face a resting area, which some people love and some people hate. It's subjective, really. Actually, it's highly subjective. Some people will glaze the Bayverse level of detail, other people will dunk on it. It's like icing on a cake. You should be mindful about how much you added. If you add too much, it's gonna be an overwhelming mess that's hard to digest. Some people love lots of icing. Some people are not a fan of it. Anyways, with that out of the way, let's learn how to add more detail and eye candy. There's lots of methods you can use, so get ready. Emphasizing. It's not just about making things bigger. No, what element do you want to be noticed first? Emphasizing on a specific part of a character design can create attention and can promote some type of identity, making them feel memorable. Think of Mickey Mouse's big ears, Pikachu's tail, or the small crown from the Very Odd Parents. There's multiple ways to emphasize an element. Number 1. Proportions. Imagine some guy with a pair of goggles. Maybe you want to make the goggles a part of his identity, using exaggerated proportions that you want people to remember. Number 2. Repetition. Like Ru and Mei from HSR. She has this DNA symbol all over her design. By having repeating elements, it gives the design a visual identity. It also makes your design feel more coherent and consistent. Number 3. Breaking repetition. By adding an element that interrupts repetition, it demands attention and gets emphasized. Contrast creates attention. Keep this in mind. Simple shapes. Since we can read simple shapes faster, we can add big simple shapes. The most memorable parts of a design are usually the most readable parts. Let's say a big round hat. This hat is easy to recognize. Number 5. Motifs. We like motifs. It adds another layer of coherence. For example, Ellen Jo from CCC. She has a shark motif, and they emphasize and support this shark motif by using sharp shape language and this sort of goth punk aesthetic. Next, let's talk about transitions. Abruptly switching to another accessory can be a bit boring. What we can do instead is make transitions because it looks nice. Number 1, it could be another layer of clothing or accessory. This could be a color that blends the two pieces together like a gradient, or maybe a color that creates a clear separation. Overall, adding more layers of clothing could also add more depth into your outfit and small subtle changes to the silhouette. Number 2, we could add more details between them to create some sort of clear separation. This can be very distracting if not handled well. It could be detailed frills on the skirt, patterns on the stocking, maybe belts. Number 3, we could also add details that sort of makes the colors intersect each other. It could be small little patterns like stripes, dots, or maybe bigger patterns if you want more attention. It gives a nice transition without exactly blending colors like a gradient. Number 4, some sort of frame or outline to break them up and clearly separates the different pieces of clothing. More tips. Big, medium, small. We love visual hierarchies. Remember the 60-30-10 rule? This can be applied for almost anything. Color palettes, shape language, the accessories themselves. If your character has a bunch of repeated elements, give your elements some sort of variation. By changing the sizes, it can make it a bit more interesting to look at. Accessories can be very attention-grabbing, and they can highly influence the silhouette. You see this long sleeve here? Add a glove, and maybe a strap, and it will completely change the form. There's endless possibilities. Texture. They aren't really silhouette changing, but they're a nice way to really spice up your design. For example, 2B. She has a full black outfit, and to add a little more spice to her outfit, the boots are leather while the dress is fabric. Using multiple types of material and texture is a nice way to add some variation without necessarily adding more colors or accessories. Patterns. They're a nice way to fill out some blank space. I'm not saying that blank space is a bad thing. Sometimes patterns can also hold purpose, like kimono patterns, which hold symbolic purpose, or camouflage, which holds a practical purpose. Value and color. We've discussed this earlier. To keep it distinct, keep the values distinct. You could also use this to your advantage. Let's take a dress here. The dress is very distracting, but by making the colors a bit more similar, it becomes a bit less distracting for the eyes. Remember, contrast creates attention and separation. Details affected by the environment. Burn marks on a blacksmith apron, dented and scratched up armor, or torn clothing. It's a nice way to add details and also visual storytelling. Some details will also occur naturally. Armor can be highly reflective, and the lighting will automatically add more detail. Clothing, depending on how loose it is, folds will naturally occur, making it more detailed. Remember when I said that details usually makes your design harder to read? There's a reason why I said usually. Look at Luna Snow's shorts. By adding the extra layer of blue, it clearly separates her shorts from her thighs. Or imagine this, a superhero wears a blue cape and a blue suit. It's hard to read, right? If we add textures to the cape, it's a bit easier to distinguish between the suit and the cape. So if you're careful, by adding details, you can actually make your designs more readable. To summarize, details can be cool, careful that it doesn't clutter your design. First, let's start out with focal points. Focal points are basically the main points of interest. But where should the main focal point be? The most common focal point is the face. The reason why? We as humans love faces. We form emotional connections easier through facial expressions. And not to mention, faces are highly expressive, making them the most personality-dense area. Now some artists might say, if the main focal point is not the face, then this design is bad. Which I kinda disagree on. Listen, you can definitely disagree with me here if you want. In my opinion, the main focal point depends on what you intend to be noticed first. Do you want to show off their personality? Then yeah, having the main focal point near the face would be great. What about an unsettling character? You could take the main focal point away from the face to dehumanize them, or emphasize a beautiful dress to show off their status, or their overwhelming and over-the-top presence, or maybe a highly important or symbolic object tied to the character. You could say make them notice the face first, then make them explore the rest of the design later. But why force the face to be the main focal point when our brains are wired to seek out faces naturally. Not to mention, if a movie wants to emphasize on the facial expression, they do a close-up shot anyways. But if the face isn't in focus, it's harder to connect and like the character. There's plenty of characters that don't show their entire face, yet are still absolutely beloved by fans. Emotion isn't only shown through faces. And yes, you can have multiple points of interest. Just make sure the most important one stands out the most. If too many focal points are competing, then your design might lose clarity and direction. Next, let's talk about lines. It's a great way to lead viewers' eyes into points of interest. Straight parallel lines can lead your eyes in both directions, while lines that converge will lead the eyes into one direction. Quick tip: if you add something to break up the converging lines, it kinda acts like a speed bump. You could use this to create a secondary focal point. By the way, take a look at Penance from Arknight. A neat little detail I like is this pointy end of the hammer. It pulls your eyes just a bit more downward to further sell this feeling of weight. Even without the use of lines, you could use details to guide the eyes around your design, like a little path. It could also be the level of detail gradually changing as it's nearing the focal point, because our eyes naturally move from big to small. We glance at big areas and start focusing on complex areas. Another way to gather attention is using contrast, which we covered earlier. Framing. When we frame something in a somewhat simple shape, it demands attention, because we can read simple shapes faster. This might be why we love nuns. Let's talk about static and dynamic. First, straight lines and curved lines. Straight lines can convey stability, strength, or maybe structure. Curved lines can convey movement, fluidity, or maybe grace. In general, curved lines are more dynamic, but that doesn't make straight lines a bad thing. Another way to make your design more dynamic is by adding some asymmetry. Some might say that asymmetry is a cheap way to make viewers explore your designs for longer, but I find asymmetrical designs to be fun, so who cares? Be careful. If you add too much asymmetry, it might lead to an unstable and unpleasant character design. Let's take a quick look at Serval from HSR. As you can see, it's very asymmetrical. However, Serval's design is generally a lot more well received than Chaska's. How come? You could say there's a better distribution of colors, the silhouette is more interesting, but another thing I believe really makes the design a lot more well received is how the visual weight of these designs has been balanced. We learned that darker colors are usually heavier. To balance this, the silhouette of Serval's white is a lot more prominent and feels bigger to balance out the dark. Chaska's design here just kinda fails to balance it. A lot of it just piles on the right, and for many players it just felt awkward to look at. So remember, a visually appealing design isn't just about adding, it's also about balancing and organizing. I think we have enough knowledge for now to finally start designing a bit. I have some designs here I made a while ago. 2 of them I'll try and hopefully improve. I want you to keep in mind, a lot of character designers has different workflows and techniques. This is just my own process. I guess to give some context for these characters, this tall dragon lady here, she's supposed to feel intimidating and threatening, but also a bit friendly. The second character I have here is a cute little guy. Since both of these are important characters I plan to integrate into a story, I will be doing some heavy planning. First, tone. Not too goofy and cartoony, so I won't really exaggerate too much with the shape language. On a purpose and rule of cool scale, maybe somewhere in the middle. I want them to look nice, but still be functional, as in the audience will likely have an idea what kind of person they are just by their design and fashion alone. I started off with the mood. How do I want the audience to feel when they see this character? I also chose music to accompany their mood. I chose season style one after another for the tall dragon lady. For Minfi as space design, I chose Drop Pop Candy, and for his second design, I chose Asphyxia. Second, I came up with the concepts. I already had the concepts ready. These are some pretty old characters, so I only made minor adjustments to the concepts. Visuals. What materials and elements could I use to support this concept and mood? To expand a bit, I also did a list of traits. Whenever I search for references, I try to study the reference. Let's say a piece of armor. Why is it shaped this way? How is the armor attached? Or cultural fashion. What's the cultural meaning and symbolism behind the piece? Then I also ask, can I stylize the reference in some way to fit the character? I would highly suggest doing some basic lighting to actually have a clear idea of how your design looks in practice. Lighting can affect how your design is perceived. I tried checking up on my designs. I asked people what they thought of the dragon lady, and yeah, the design seems to be functional. But look at the design, something's missing, right? It just feels flat. I turned the image into grayscale and blurred it a bit. As you can see, some of it seems to easily blend together. Some of the details feel purposeless and boring, and also the variation of detail. Some like to do 70% detail, and some go even further, with 60% of the details being practical, 30% being symbolic, 10% being decorative or something like that. You can see the new version here, even if blurred, is still more clear to read. After some final touches, this is what I came up with. I'm very satisfied with the results. They seem to fit the character a lot more. Minfia's second design I'm not gonna sit and explain. A lot of the design choices is driven by story, but the design does its job at conveying the feeling of something more mysterious, intimidating, less bubbly and more seductive. So I'm satisfied enough with it. The only thing I'm not satisfied with is the weapon. I kinda rushed it. It's supposed to be a meteor hammer on one end and a whip on the other. Are these gonna be the final designs? Probably not, but they are a lot closer to what I could call a final design. We're about to explore some very, very subjective topics. If a kid can redraw your character, it's a good design. I disagree. I think it's a nice way to check if your design is readable and memorable, but I don't think it should undermine the value of other designs which are more complex, nuanced, and symbolic. And honestly, with enough simplification, almost any design could look like a child's drawing. Character subversion. How much subversion can you really do? I believe that good subversion is purposeful subversion. There's various reasons why people do subversions. Maybe for a comedic effect, maybe to critique common tropes, or maybe to add more thematic depth. Let's take a look at Beelzebub again from Hazbin Hotel. I don't watch Hazbin, but I have to say, I do think this is a pretty clever and thoughtful subversion. She doesn't represent gluttony through overeating, but through overindulgence. However, while I think it's thoughtful and I can appreciate the effort, I wouldn't say it's necessarily the best. In my opinion, the subversion has gone so far to the point it becomes really unclear what she's actually supposed to represent. It just feels like subversion for the sake of subversion. Is it wrong to like these tell-don't-show designs? No, I wouldn't say so. I'm just viewing this from a visual communication standpoint. 2-in-1 characters. Think of Cloak and Dagger or Svarog and Clara from HSR. Since these designs were made with the intent of being together, should they count as one design or two separate designs? I have no idea honestly. Readability equals good. Not always. Let me explain why. Readability is great for us to understand a character at first glance. Let's say you draw a character who's an assassin or Batman. Why would it make sense that an unpredictable character should have a dynamic, clear, high contrast and readable outfit? I have a different version of my Minfia design where the values are much more distinct. However, where the values are a lot more distinct and it's a lot easier to read the design, but it just doesn't give the same mysterious, dark and heavy vibe as the other one, which is what I was trying to convey. Over detailing is bad. I mostly agree with this one. But what if it's the point? What if the over detailing is supposed to feel overwhelming? What if their personality and energy is supposed to feel loud and over the top? Or even the Bayverse Transformers, they feel complex and alien. In some cases, the amount of details can actually become a storytelling method. More exaggeration equals good. Not always true. The lack of expression and exaggeration can also be character. We've covered this earlier with characters like Sanhua from Wuthering Waves. Her color palette is very muted, but this is not a flaw. It's a reflection of her cold and stale personality. There's this moment in Stemdust Art's character design video where he says that this design might be improved by
maybe push the shape language just a little bit more, and I think you can easily get this to an S tier.
While I respect his opinion, I do also disagree with it. I think it's fine. Due to the lack of exaggerated shapes, her body shape is more exposed. To me, this makes her feel more human and fragile. And the way her wings shield her, this reads to me as a person who is vulnerable, fragile, and also isolated, closing herself off. This stillness and quietness is still storytelling. Not every character has to be loud. Not every silhouette has to punch you in the eyes. Sometimes less can be more. Everything we've discussed here has something in common, which is intent. You can definitely break a lot of quote-unquote design character rules if it's for a reason that enhances your character or story. Everything you do to a design, and I really do mean everything, the level of detail, the concepts, readability, shape, color, everything, and I mean everything, will affect the psychology of how a viewer perceives your character. I'm not saying that intent is a magical shield. A good idea for design can always be modeled by poor execution. Sorry, I just wanted to let that out. This video took so long to make, it's crazy. If you want to know my sources where I learned designing, first, I have an 8-hour playlist of videos you can watch. This 8-minute and 44-second video is actually hours. It's basically a summary, but it's also a recording of the entire design theory section of Rinotuna's character design course on Coloso, playing at 500x speed. I didn't feel like spending money for the actual course, so what I did instead, I decided to go through the entire video, frame by frame, to study the course. There is a few things that I decided to leave out cause I did feel guilty telling some knowledge that I learned from Rinotuna's course. So if you want a good course for character design, I would highly suggest checking out Rinotuna's course on Coloso. Sometimes they give discount coupons. I'm not sponsored, by the way. A channel which I also recommend is Coloso. They give a lot of great tips for designing appealing looking characters. And if you want some tip for improving, to build up your visual library, I would suggest to observe and analyze fashion magazines or other character designs and analyze why these designs work so well, or why they don't. I would also suggest just learning design theory in general. Let me know if I should do longer videos like this. Do the subscribe thing, cause I told you to do so. Alright, good night. I'm done with this video. Thank you for watching.